What's up, everyone? I'm Zaida, and this is Read Books Get Lit. Thank you so much for being here today. We are jumping straight into the second installment of a series I'm doing here on my channel. That series is called The Books That Made Me. In the first video, I talked about some of the children's books that shaped me into the reader that I am today. I will admit that I added a couple of series that are probably more on the middle grade side of things, but I read them during a time period that I've sort of categorized in my memory and in my brain as more childrensy. So that's why they're included in that. If you want to see what books I talked about, definitely go check that video out. But today we are moving forward and we're going to talk about some of the middle grade and young adult books that influenced me as a reader. Okay, so let's dive right in because we have a lot to get through. The first book I want to talk about is called The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. Long story short, Turtle, the main character, she and her family move into Sunset Towers, and it is filled with very colorful and eclectic residents. There's a man, Samuel Westing. He's sort of this elusive rich guy who lives in town, and he dies. In his will, he names the residents of Sunset Towers as possible heirs, but he also states that one of them killed him, and they have to work in pairs and use the clues that he's given them to figure out who the murderer is. This book was so fun. Like, characters alone, again, they were super weird, but the friendships and the relationships between the characters were really cool and fun to read. So I really enjoyed that. The other part, the figuring out the mystery, the clues, like trying to work my, you know, 7, 8 year old brain to try to figure out these clues, that was really exciting. It challenged me. It was like, my brain was still developing, but it definitely set that precedent to, think critically about things and try to solve the mystery as I was reading through the story, which I really enjoyed. Fun fact, they made this into a movie. I think it was a direct to video movie. They didn't keep the same title though. They changed the title to Get a Clue, not to be confused with the Disney Channel original movie also called Get a Clue. That one stars Lindsay Lohan and Brenda Song. Equally good movie, but not the same. Although both mysteries in a way. That's a coincidence, I guess. But this movie, Get a Clue, based off of the Westing game, stars a very young Shane West. I obviously did not know who he was when I was watching the movie in 1999 or in 2000, but of course later on when I'm watching A Walk to Remember and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and I'm like, holy crap, that is the same guy from the Westing game movie. Small world. The next book that I have very, very fond memories of is Wayside School is Falling Down by Lewis Sacker. I think technically this is the second book in the series, but I'm pretty sure it's the most well known. This story, this book, it's sort of, I guess, like a collection anthology in a way. Every chapter is about a different student at Wayside School. I remember in the fourth grade, my teacher, Mrs. Andrin, she would read a chapter a day to us. And I remember thinking how like zany and like weird and funny and silly and goofy these characters were, because they were all super different. They were all like kind of cartoony in a way because they were just so like elaborate in their personality traits. Definitely have very, very happy memories reading this book. Even as an adult, I reread it maybe 5, 6 years ago. There's a second Lewis Sacker book that I absolutely have to talk about, and that is Holes. I'm sure most people remember the Disney movie, which came out in maybe 2002, somewhere around that time period. But the book is equally magical, right? It's a Newbery Medal Award winner. This book covers different timelines, different family generations. There's stories taking place on different continents. You know, the subject matter, if we really do a deep dive into holes, right? We cover everything from classism, racism, the ugly side of American history, the youth justice system. There's a lot going on in this book, which I think is aimed at, what, 8, 9, 10 year olds to maybe 14, 16. Those are some heavy hitters for young kids. But the thing that's really cool, and the way that Lewis Sacker wrote this book, is that he doesn't dumb any of it down. He doesn't, you know, write and talk about these in the sort of patronizing way. He just presents it in a very honest, a very sincere approach to a young audience. And gotta give him props for that alone. My favorite thing about this is how brilliantly Lewis Sacker connected all the characters, all the events, the history, what's going on in modern day. He connected them all so wonderfully. I can only dream of being half as good as he is in my own writing. It definitely holds up. It doesn't matter how old or young you are when you read it. It is still a good story. It is still very, very, what is the word? What is the word? It's inviting. It's very inviting for readers. And I think that's why kids and adults still really enjoy Holes to this day. I got so hyped up talking about Holes, I have to calm back down a little bit. That's how much I really fucking love that book. Okay, moving on to the books that I actually own. The first one I have to talk about is Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys. This book is probably one of the reasons why I became a historical fiction fan. So I didn't read her previous two that came out before this. This was my first of hers that I read. It's still my favorite of the three that I have read so far. I have two more on my shelf. I will get to them eventually. But this book, for sort of a quick Spark Notes version, it is historical fiction. It's set in January of 1945, I believe. And there's this big event that's happening. It happened in real life. The Germans were trying to evacuate a bunch of military personnel, civilians, and they were converging everyone to get onto the Wilhelm Gustloff, I think is how you might say it, maybe. Don't mean to offend, but the Wilhelm Gustloff was a German transportation ship during World War II. It was huge, and thousands of people boarded the ship, and unfortunately, the ship sank, and I think over 9,000 people died as a result of it. So this book actually has 4 POVs, which I am not a big fan of multiple POVs. I can do 2. That's sort of my cap, is 2 POVs. But this book has 4, and I did not know that going in. So by the time I read the 4th POV, I thought, oh no, how is this going to work? But I will say, it's written so well with very distinct voices for each character that I was able to keep them all separate. None of them blended. It was, I think, the first time that I felt really good with more than 2 POVs. Also, in general, Ruta Sepetys' writing style is top notch. I really enjoy that it's not overly flowery, but it's still very beautiful, very poetic in its own way. It has a very straightforward approach, but it's also elevated. And I think at the root of it, it's very honest writing, and it's very true to the characters that she's writing about. Rudis Apetys is definitely an automatic buy author for me after reading this for the first time. Oh boy, this book. Okay, so the next one that I have to talk about, it definitely did influence me in my young adult phase. That is Scribbler of Dreams by Mary E. Pearson. This book was the gateway. This was my entry into YA contemporary and YA contemporary romance specifically. I had just read Romeo and Juliet in my ninth grade English class with Mr. Coates. And basically, Scribbler of Dreams is a modern day take on Romeo and Juliet. That's just, that's all you need to know. I read this book. It was very much the forbidden lovers story. And now that I'm thinking about it, there were several other books that I read during this time period that really fit the bill of forbidden lovers. But I have a strong feeling that Scribbler of Dreams started that. Um, this book was so influential that I created my very first personal email. It was a Yahoo email, and my handle was was based off of the title of this book. Like it's very similar to the title. And I still use that email to this day. And it has been many, many years since I first created it. But that just goes to show how influenced I was by this book. And I definitely think about the book every day when I log into my email account and I have to put my username in. And I think about, oh yeah, that book I bought from Walden Books, which is basically Romeo and Juliet, but like in the countryside or on the farm. I have to bring up the Freedom Writer's Diary. This is nonfiction. It's, I guess, an anthology or a compilation of journal and diary entries from the students of Woodrow Wilson High School in Long Beach, California. I think the students probably they were in school from like mid 90s to maybe 98 or something. And this is Aaron Gruel, their English teacher who kind of, you know, put this whole thing together. It started out as a class project and it became so much more. They did make a movie about it, 2005 or 2006, I think, also called The Freedom Writers. And that was my entry into this book, was the film. I rewatched that DVD over and over and over again. I still have it. I still watch it. It's one of my favorites. I have always been a journal, diary kid person. And even though my background and experience is vastly different from the kids in this book, there are also some similarities. And what I got from reading this book was, you know, they were going through some shit. I was going through some shit, and yet they still made it out on the other side. And that's the thing to hold on to. You know, the quote, be the change you wish to see in this world. That is very much applicable to these students, how they changed their lives, how they made that decision to break the cycle, break the generational cycle that they had been experiencing in their communities and their families. And that was sort of the takeaway for me as far as applying it to my own situation and everything like that. So, this book, I know people don't like nonfiction, or, you know, most readers I know aren't really into nonfiction, but I think nonfiction stories are so freaking important. I mean, memoirs, autobiographies, documentaries, docuseries. I guess because I'm really just fascinated with the human experience. I like to know about these real people who existed, who did these things, who changed the world, even in a small, unassuming way. I am an advocate for non-fiction stories. Read them. It's important that we learn and hear about everybody else's stories. That's how we grow. That is how we grow as people, hopefully. Okay, so this next one. Oof, this one's a big one. So, Under the Blood Red Sun by Graham Salisbury. It's historical fiction, middle grade, and I first read this book in the 5th grade for school. I have not seen me represented in a book to such degree than Under the Blood Red Sun. I mean, this was the first time, and for years and years and years and years, the only time that I saw myself and people like me in a book. So, SparkNotes version, Tomi, he is Japanese American, and he experiences the attack on Pearl Harbor, and it kind of showcases what he and his family go through in the aftermath of that event on the island. And again, I really can't think of other works out there that focus on the Japanese community the way that this book does, especially when it's about the United States or America's involvement within World War II. Most of the things that are out there, movies and TVs and books, most of it's just about Haole military people. And that's great and all, but do we really need more of that? Probably not. For those of you who don't know, Haole in this context just means white. Obviously, I have my biased about this story because of my own personal family ties to what happened in 1941. My grandparents, they were young adults when December 7th rolled around. My grandpa, he was one of the many Japanese American men who volunteered for the army. He joined the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and they fought in Italy and France. And that's that is a big part of my family history. That's a big part of local Hawaiian history as well. And I just don't think that many people know about it. There aren't enough stories about it. And I wish that there were. There needs to be more. So, this book, because simply the representation, the the care that Graham Salisbury takes. Now, mind you, Graham Salisbury is a white dude, right? That's fine. And yet, he takes a lot of care, I think, with writing Tomi and his family and their experiences. I think that for what it is as a middle grade book, again, I read this when I was 10. I think it does a really good job at presenting the issues, presenting these historical events in a way that is easily digestible for a young audience. Again, you don't have to be 10 to read it. You can read it as an adult and enjoy it just the same. This is actually one of 4, I want to say, in this entire series. And I have the other 3. I've read them all. I really appreciate that they all focus on, like, not white characters. Which, I mean, let's be honest, most of the stories during World War II are about white characters. Although, guess what? There are other people living in the world at that time who were also experiencing World War II. Maybe let's tell their stories. Just a thought. This list would not be complete without talking about The Outsiders. This book. This is the paperback. This is not the first edition. I wish I did have like the first printing. I think this was printed probably in the 90s sometimes, but I do have the paperback, and I did also get the 50th anniversary hardcover edition because duh. I love this book so wholeheartedly. Top 10. Top 10 books ever. I don't care what other books I read in life. This has a permanent space in my top 10 list. no questions asked, right? I'm pretty sure that I read this, I want to say towards the end of 8th grade. I borrowed it from the library and then I read it, watched the movie afterwards, fell in love with the movie too. Everything about it just hit home for me. And then I rediscovered it again as an adult and, fell in love with it all over again. There's literally everything in this book is on point, right? It goes back to S.E. Hinton writing honest, truthful, raw, sincere characters that are going through some shit, but somehow in the mix of all of it, the theme, the thing that is holding these characters together, this town together, is their hope. Their hope for a better life, their hope for a better ending. And as someone who is a self-proclaimed pessimist, I am very much a cup half empty type of person. I cling to the hope in this story. It touches on so many things, like classism, the economy, feeling of loss and desperation. You know, it's that universal hopelessness that teenagers go through, that young adults go through. It's all here, right? And it translates off the page through S.E. Hinton's writing. Again, the characters, they are so raw, but they're so sincere and honest that you you can't, if you dislike this book, we cannot be friends. That's where I draw the line. If you end up hating this book or think it's stupid or oh that's not real, like why would they get into a fight over that? No, thank you. All jokes aside, this book, The Outsiders, it is phenomenal. It is iconic. It is everlasting. I love it dearly. I love the movie so much. I hope and pray that one day I can see the musical. I had a dream the other night that I spontaneously booked a flight to New York and I saw the musical and it was wonderful. So I hope one day I get to see the musical. That would be amazing. But this book, everything about this story is, well, it's gold. We have made it to the end of the video. I appreciate you being here with me, sticking it out. I know it was a lot to get through. In the next video, we are going to finish my list of middle grade and young adult books that made me the reader I am today. Let me know in the comments below if you like any of the books that I mentioned. If you don't like any of the books, tell me why. I am very curious to know. And as always, if there was at least one thing you enjoyed about this video, please consider giving this a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel, as it can definitely help me grow in the YouTube universe. I hope you have a great rest of your day. If you want to catch the first installment, the children's books that made me the reader I am today, please feel free to check that out. And I will see you again in the next video. Until then, bye.